Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Evan Woods. I serve as Mayor Wilson's labor liaison, and I'm very excited to welcome you here today to celebrate this historic settlement for Seattle workers. Yeah, thank you, man. Seattle's Office of Labor Standards has won a $4.4 million settlement for Uber Eats drivers. It's second largest ever, and it will benefit over 14,000 workers. Today, we're going to hear from Mayor Wilson about how workers' rights, higher pay, stronger labor standards play a critical role in her affordability agenda. We'll hear from OLS Director Steve Marchese about how the OLS team under his leadership reached this historic settlement. We'll hear from Working Washington Executive Director Danielle Alvarado about the central role that Working Washington played, and Uber Eats drivers themselves both played in passing the 2022 app-based minimum pay ordinance that has facilitated this settlement. And we'll hear from Uber Eats drivers themselves about what this means in their own lives. So thank you all for joining us, and I'd like to welcome Mayor Katie Wilson to the podium.
Okay, thank you, Evan. How are y'all feeling today? Well, I'm very excited to be here with you all. For too many Seattleites, our city is unaffordable. The cost of rent, the cost of housing, the cost of childcare, and the cost of food and gas. Since January, my administration has worked hard to make things more affordable for workers and their families. We've enhanced bus service to help folks get to work, expanded the Seattle preschool program to serve hundreds more families, won universal school meals for all students, banned rental junk fees to make sure that the price renters see is the price they pay, and we are working to ban AI pricing to make groceries more affordable. But there's another critical part of an affordability agenda, and that is strengthening unions and labor rights. Yes. Ensuring that Seattle workers earn more in their paychecks and preventing billion-dollar corporations and other unscrupulous employers from committing wage theft against our people. That is why I'm so happy to announce that Seattle's Office of Labor Standards has reached a settlement with Uber Eats, returning nearly $4.4 million to over 14,000 Uber Eats drivers who work in the city of Seattle. Our Office of Labor Standards, under Steve Marchese's leadership, is a model for similar agencies across the nation, and I'm proud of the work that they've accomplished. I'm also proud of the courage and perseverance of the Uber Eats drivers themselves, who came forward to assert their rights against a powerful multinational corporation and to help ensure that thousands of their fellow drivers were paid what they're owed so they can continue to put food on the table for their families. And I'm very happy to welcome leaders from Working Washington here today as well. Working Washington was instrumental in passing the app-based worker minimum pay ordinance in 2022, which guaranteed workers a level of minimum pay, protection for justified cancellations, and enabled Uber Eats drivers to win this historic settlement. They have continued the important work of organizing drivers and building power for all gig workers in the years since then. As long as I am mayor, the city of Seattle will be an ally to all workers, fighting to be paid what they're owed, fighting for dignified lives and careers, and fighting to provide a better life for themselves and their families. This is how we make Seattle an affordable city, by bringing together the struggles of these courageous workers, of unions, of transit riders, renters, parents with young children, and consumers just trying to make ends meet. I am committed to continuing to work with OLS, with workers across the city, with Working Washington, and with community leaders to support these struggles and to make our city more affordable for all. And now, I would like to welcome OLS Director Steve Marchese to the podium to talk more about this historic settlement.
Thank you so much, Mayor Wilson, and I am Steve Marchese, Director of OLS. Proud to be the director of this department, and I'm here with some of the members of the OLS team. I want to thank you all. You all deserve a round of applause for the work that we're doing, so thank you. So today is truly a milestone day for app-based workers in Seattle, and I want you to think about it. More than 14,000 app-based workers are getting back almost $4.4 million, money they earned but were not paid. And I want you to think about how many people that is. That's enough to fill nearly every seat in a sold-out Kraken game at Climate Pledge. The average payout to workers is going to be about $300 to over $5,000 per person. And these payments have started to go out already. They started back on August 10th. And what's at issue here is a few different policies that are raised by the ordinance, the app-based worker minimum payment ordinance. At issue is fee cancellation, that Uber Eats failed to consistently provide a minimum payment for canceled orders when it was required by law. And this is including when workers went to a pickup location and reported to Uber Eats that an order needed to be canceled for cause. Under those provisions of the ordinance, the worker should have been paid a fee for that cancellation. Also at issue is they were not paid for all of the time that they were working in the city of Seattle. And the law is clear. Uber Eats should have paid the workers the money it owed them for all the time spent working in Seattle. And now these workers will finally be paid what they are owed for their time and hard work. I am proud of the work that our office does to advance workers' rights and support these laws that provide a baseline compensation for work done in the city. The app-based gig worker economy burst onto the scene not that many years ago with little or no regard for worker rights, and in a matter of a few years, the city successfully passed laws that not only gave workers protections in their non-traditional workplace, but ensured that they could make a living. And again, many thanks to Working Washington and gig workers for bringing up these issues and elevating the needs of gig workers at a time when it was really important. Since 2024, more than $6 million has been returned to more than 18,000 workers because of the app-based worker minimum payment ordinance alone. And since OLS became a separate cabinet-level agency, a separate office in 2017, we have been able to return nearly $70 million to workers, nearly 124,000 workers in the city of Seattle. This settlement is about accountability and fairness. We want to send a clear message to all of the network companies operating in Seattle, including Uber Eats, that we will enforce the law to ensure workers receive every dollar they've earned. We will continue to investigate worker complaints and, as the mayor said, work toward making Seattle a more equitable and affordable place to live. So thank you for being here with us. And I want to acknowledge and bring up Danielle Alvarado from Working Washington.
Hi, box Jen. Hi, everybody. Danielle Alvarado, proud to be the Executive Director of Working Washington. There are just a couple of things I want to say as we're celebrating this settlement. We've heard such a great overview of why this work is important about this industry and this particular ordinance. But I want to take us back to 2017, 2018, when the beginnings of what became the Pay Up campaign, which fought for many years to pass this ordinance and others for this industry, first started to come together. And at that time, it was almost inconceivable that gig corporations would be held accountable for the way they treated the people that make their platforms run. And it seemed so far from reach that these workers would be treated with the same basic respect that workers in any other industry have. It's not that long ago. There were cities around the country who were afraid to touch this industry. It wasn't really a job, they told us. It was a tech platform only. And now here we are in 2026 with the best worker protections in the nation, not just minimum pay, but transparency and disclosure protections, and of course, protection from being fired by a bot. And as we have so many people worried about AI at this time, I want to remind you, gig workers have been on the front lines of being managed by technology and have successfully organized to make sure, no, we can clap for that. Successfully organized and won. Workers like Umberto and Sam, who are here today, made the biggest difference in getting us here today. It was workers who determined at that time that the biggest problems that they were facing could become solutions reflected in law at a time when we had never done it before. They said Seattle can be that place, and we are that place today. Unfortunately, it is taking some corporations some time to come to terms with the fact that the rules have changed. Uber Eats has racked up, if I have done the math correctly, between $20 and $25 million in penalties and fines in the last year, I think, between violations of this and other labor standards in Seattle. And unfortunately, I can only guess that there might be some people who were banking on being able to get away with breaking the law. And I say that because we have the honor of organizing with workers in many industries, and unfortunately, there are too many low-road businesses that count on no one holding them accountable when they steal people's pay, when they retaliate against their use of sick time, when they let their workers experience harassment on the job. But this settlement shows how wrong they are about Seattle, because we have incredibly tenacious advocates at the Office of Labor Standards and more than a decade of partnerships between community organizations and government. Our work together is what makes it possible for workers to believe that if they know what their rights are, that it is worth their time to come forward because they have a government that is going to stand with them and hold corporations to account. And so many of us talk to people every single day who do not believe that the government is going to do anything to help them. And we have shown that to not be the case time and time again for workers, and we're so grateful to the leadership of the Office of Labor Standards in helping make that a reality in our city. That also is due to the steady support we've had with Mayor Wilson and the mayor's office in general to really say that labor standards enforcement is a core part of what we do as a city. That saying that the kind of governance that we want to uphold, we know has to happen in partnership with community organizations, that's how we build trust, that's how we identify the most pressing issues to move forward on, and that we are equal partners in making this a city where all of us are thriving. Thank you, Steve, for the work of your team, Mayor Wilson, for being here. I think as we encounter more and more challenges and threats and obstacles, knowing that we have the steadfast commitment and support of such important leaders in the city is important, not just for the work we do here in Seattle, but about continuing to set a high bar for our neighboring cities, for the state of Washington, to say that this is going to be a place where every single worker thrives no matter what, and that it is a vision that we can accomplish here in Washington. So, you know, I have to say, every time we have a moment like this, I would rather not have this settlement. I'd rather not have a chance to have a microphone in my hand. I'd rather people get paid right the first time. But this is a nice second if we don't get that today. So with that, I'm going to invite Umberto up to share a little bit about his experience as a driver.
Hello, I'm a driver, and my name is Umberto, and I've been a gig worker for years. This settlement is important for gig workers in the entire city because it tells the story of what is really going on. The app corporations keep piling absurd fees on customers, only to then steal the pay from the workers they blame for the fees in the first place. What I want customers to understand is, for everyone, we need to hold corporations accountable, because when they get away with it taken from workers, they take away from customers and the community as a whole. It is so important that the largely immigrant workforce that does gig work knows that the city of Seattle has our backs on it. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you everybody for being here. So the mayor has offered to meet everybody. I mean, she would love to meet community leaders, would love to meet drivers. OLS team, please stick around. Working Washington team, please stick around. This is the end of our kind of formal recording program. Appreciate y'all being here, and we'll kind of meet over here for a meet and greet and some photos. Thanks.